Q&A. That doesn't mean I'm doing 100,000 questions. It's to celebrate the fact that I've reached over 100,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, which I literally can't believe. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Now, I asked you guys on my Instagram stories if you had any questions for me, baking or non-baking related, and loads of you got in touch, so I thought it would be fun to do a quick Q&A. So first question, and I think a good place to start, Natural Bosa is asking, how old am I? So it is October 2019 and I have just turned 28. People think I'm like early 20s. In fact, I still get ID'd. I hope it's a good thing. So same follower has also asked if I am a full-time YouTuber. I am not a full-time YouTuber. I run my cake business, I do other cake projects, I run cake workshops. YouTube is almost like a side thing and I absolutely love making it. So at any time I have spare, I try and record videos. So Amy E. Bealby has asked, what's the most expensive cake I've ever made? What is the most expensive cake I've ever made? So, it was a wedding cake. I priced my wedding cakes per portion, and it just so happens it was a huge wedding cake. It was 5 tiers tall, and it was over £1,000. Samantha 8424 has asked me what the worst cake making disaster I've ever had. So actually a lot of you have asked me this question. I don't know why everyone is so obsessed with knowing the disasters. There are a couple of situations that stood out for me. One was I was making a wedding cake. I think it was like midnight and I had literally worked all day. It was the bottom tier and I was making the drips for it. And I think the cream wasn't hot enough, or I didn't let it melt the chocolate enough. The ganache was too thick, and I knew it was too thick, but I was so tired and just wanted to go to sleep that I was like, this probably isn't gonna work, but I'm gonna put it on the cake anyway. Put it on, the drips didn't work. So I literally had to scrape the whole outer coating of buttercream off with the ganache, which was a total mess. Set it in the fridge, walk away for an hour. I may have even gone to sleep. Anyway, I came back and just started again. That was pretty horrendous. Another disaster happened, but that was to do with transporting a cake, which was fun. I basically forgot to buy a box big enough for the bottom tier, so I just brought it on a tray, and in the car, the cake had literally just moved around. It was only the single tier, but luckily, you can hide mistakes, and so I'm not gonna reveal what cake it was, and you will forever be guessing, because you will never know. So George Wright has asked a really good question. How do you build up a client base if you want to go into cake making? So my client base came over time. Like most things, even in the world of social media, word of mouth is the most powerful marketing tool. And especially when you're talking about cakes, people need to taste your cake. So I remember when I started off, I made one cake, someone at that event tried the cake, and then that person ordered a cake, and then someone at that event tried the cake, and then 2 people ordered, and then it really went from there. And only later on did my reputation and brand grow, that people kind of trusted an overall opinion. I went down a route of being a chef at a cafe, and I actually got to know some customers there, and so made personal relationships with them, and they were trying my food anyway. So there's not really one way of doing it, but people eating your cakes is probably the most important thing. Courtney's Cakes _X has asked, how did I get into baking and what made me keep going with it? I actually have explained on my Instagram, in my highlights, my story of how I got into baking. It's quite a long story, so I'm not going to say it all now, but I recommend you heading over to my page at George's Cakes, and it's on my highlight saying my story, and it literally shows from where I ended high school to where I am now. So go ahead and check that out. Marley has asked, am I married? No, not yet. Chef Robert Jones has asked the very simple question of, will I eventually open a shop? I would love to open a shop. I live in London and it's one of the most expensive cities in the world, so opening a shop isn't as simple as it sounds. Hopefully one day I will be in that position. So Martor Tega has asked, did I have a lot of baking experience before studying at Le Cordon Bleu? I didn't. I did it as a very little side hobby. In fact, I didn't think I was actually wanting to go into the world of baking. I kind of realised that during my course. So I had very little baking experience before then. Dave has asked what my tips are for storing cakes and how long they are safe to eat, especially if it's hot. Legally, well, at least in England, you're meant to give dairy, especially, a 3-day shelf life. So once I give the cake to a client, I say eat within 3 days. Once the cake is covered in buttercream, it's almost airtight, so it actually stays fresh. Now, if it's cool enough to keep outside the fridge, then it's fine outside the fridge, because there is so much sugar in the buttercream and cake that like the egg or butter in the cake won't go bad. So I recommend keeping a cake in a fridge until a couple of hours before serving, just so the buttercream isn't too soft. And especially if you live in a hot country, you don't want sloppy buttercream. Okay, non-baking related question. Jenny and T has asked why I have such clear skin. Well, firstly, you see it from a distance. It's not perfect. I actually think, firstly, I'm lucky. I've never suffered from any serious skin conditions. I think it's in diet. I like to think that I have a healthy, balanced diet, and don't wear too much makeup, and make sure I take it off at night and clean my face. And yeah, I think it's just a combination of that. Kel Castro 1. Hi Georgia, how long did it take for you to be making money with selling cakes? Now, actually, a lot of you have got in touch with business questions, and I will do a business focused video because I think a lot of you have lots of questions about it. The thing with selling cakes and making money, it depends on your individual situation. If you're baking from your home, you're not technically spending money on hiring a kitchen. So actually, if you spend, let's just say, £10 on ingredients and everything, and you're selling the cake for £50, you make £40. Now, if you hire a big factory and then make loads of cakes, you obviously have a lot more overheads than you do if you're making it from home. So for me personally, I was getting profit pretty much straight away because I was selling for more than I was spending, until I rented a kitchen where I was spending and receiving pretty much a similar amount. So didn't make money, but survived. So I've never had to like invest loads and loads of money, or I've never been in debt, but I've never made £1 million either. So Gaia.knack has asked if there is a difference between caster sugar and regular white sugar. For me, caster sugar is regular white sugar, unless you're talking about granulated sugar. So when you're talking about different sugars, you're talking about the size of the grain. Caster is quite fine, but not as fine as icing or powdered sugar, and granulated is slightly larger. So basically, white sugar, if you're dissolving it into a recipe, so for example, my Swiss meringue buttercream, you can make it with granulated, but because of the larger sugar grains, they will take longer to dissolve. So there were quite a few questions regarding Swiss meringue buttercream and air bubbles. Now, Swiss meringue buttercream is light and airy, and that's the beauty of it. The air bubbles go as you beat it. So what I usually do, I make a batch, and it does have a few air pockets. So I take the whisk out and then with a spatula, beat it with my hand, and that knocks air out. I don't worry too much when I'm filling the cake, but then to get a smooth outer coating, you beat it even more. And basically, the more you beat it, the less air bubbles there are to start with before you start smoothing it on. You can see this when you colour a batch of buttercream. So if I do pink on the outside and I colour the batch of buttercream pink, from mixing the colour in is beating out the air bubbles. So coloured buttercream is always smoother, and that's because you're beating it. I think you will always get teeny tiny air bubbles. I always say, like, don't stress over them too much. It's better to have like 2 tiny ones than just ruin the whole cake. So don't drive yourself mad. Hi, do you have a YouTube channel? Yes, I do. So someone has asked, how do you stop your fondant icing sticking to the surface when you're rolling it out? I don't use fondant, but I have worked with it. And from videos, I always thought you use icing sugar, but it turns out you should actually use a bit of corn flour or cornstarch. and that really stops it from sticking. You can also buy non-stick mats, but again, I am not an expert in this field. There may be other and better ways of doing so. Doris Bakes has asked how I get my teeth so white. I keep them clean, I don't smoke. I did whiten them once a while ago, probably like 5 years ago. I had quite yellow teeth and then I whitened them with a gel, and since then they've just stayed white, so yeah, just keep them clean. Pandasm has asked what I recommend for home bakers. That's a really good question. It kind of depends on what you want to do with your baking. If it's just for fun, then just experiment as much as possible. Try out new recipes, have fun with it. It doesn't really matter what happens to them, because if it's just for you, then great. If you're starting a business, then that's a whole other thing. And again, I will cover it in my business video that I'll be doing soon. But the main important thing is that if you're going to start a business from home, which is definitely possible because I've done the same thing, get your kitchen certified by the local council, because legally you can't be providing cakes to anyone without it. So that's very important. Lolly Patisserie has asked, why did I close my external kitchen? I'll be honest, it was mainly a financial decision. I basically had a kitchen which was very large, and the idea was to hire people, expand my cake business and for them to make it, but I decided to go down a different route instead, and that is why I closed my kitchen. Natalie Frenchie has asked, did I invent the drip cake and the fault line cake? And who or what is my inspiration? I wish I invented, or can claim that I invented, the drip cake and fault line cake, but I didn't. No one really knows who did. There are a few names that fly about. In the world we live in, it's really hard to track down who did what first, especially because of social media. I get my inspiration mainly from Instagram, and what I do is I look to see what other people are creating and don't directly copy it. I kind of go, oh, that looks really cool, how can I do something similar but put my own twist on it? And then kind of go from there and see what happens. Tidora Matic, will I create my own cooking equipment and utensils? Hopefully one day. Oh, good question, Crystal Act 1. Why did I decide to start showing my cakes on Instagram? It was probably 5-6 years ago now. I was asked to make a cake for Cara Delevingne, and I actually didn't know what Instagram was, and it was my sister Louisa who said, oh my god, she's going to upload a photo of the cake and tag you. And I literally didn't know what tag meant or what Instagram was, so she actually made me create this profile in the rush of things. I just called it George's Cakes and it somehow stuck, and then put up a load of photos of cakes that I've done in the past and other ones from like cordon bleu, which I've made, so more dessert things. And then Cara ended up tagging me and gave me a huge boost, and that was within the first month or two of having Instagram. So that was actually the main reason why I created my account. And then I realized how incredible Instagram was. It was literally a visual portfolio of my work, so kept at it. For Cake by Mel, fan versus non-fan baking. I've always cooked with a fan oven. I just think in my mind the air circulates better. I think for breads, cakes, meringues even, you want like a constant flow of air. So that's why I think fan oven is best. I have cooked macarons at a conventional heat. So conventional is when it's more like static, and essentially it's heat from the top of the oven and from the bottom of the oven doing this, so it's really even. The only thing with that is that you can only cook one tray at a time. So they actually rose really evenly, but it was a really long process. So I end up just using fan oven, and maybe a couple of macarons won't work, but I'd rather do that than cook one tray at a time, especially when I'm making quite a few of them. LBV has asked, besides baking, what other hobbies do I enjoy? I love dancing. I do yoga. I also play guitar. Well, I kind of taught myself. I wouldn't say I'm a good player. I love being busy, and I love creating things. I actually painted this, but I wouldn't say that was a hobby of mine because I paint pottery like maybe once a year. I love walking. I love being outside. I've also just invested in a bicycle, so I try and cycle as much as possible, which probably won't be possible for a long time because we're hitting winter. Amelia Dacino, how old was I when I first started to bake? I don't remember. I got into baking because my younger brother and sister on a Sunday were usually bored around tea time, and so I think I was about 15 at the time, and we used to get those like boxed mixes, and I used to literally put them up on the counter. They were younger, they were like 5. And we used to make the cakes from boxes. I guess that's when I started. And then I realised that you can actually make recipes from scratch, not boxes. S. Rightlyland has asked what GCSEs I have. For those who don't know what GCSEs are, they're your exams that you take when you're 16 before you go to sixth form college, before you go to university. So it's quite a specific question, but I took English, maths, double science, another English, geography, history, religious studies, art, and dance. And I got 5 A stars, 4 A's, and a B. I beat my brother. Happiest moment of my life. CM Wood 6692 has asked, how can I stop my chocolate drip cracking when I refrigerate my cake? So my chocolate drip is a ganache, and ganache cracks when you refrigerate it straight away. So what I like to do is when I apply the ganache drip, I leave it out the fridge for as long as possible rather than putting it directly in the fridge to set. So I let it kind of set and cloud over, then add all my decorations, and by the time I put it into the refrigerator, it's long enough for it not to crack. No, I don't do fondant cakes, unfortunately. I don't know about fondant because I don't make them. Oh, good question, Zed Esna. Things you wish you knew when setting up your business that you know now. Whenever I think of setting up my business, I don't think of a specific time. It wasn't like I sat down and go, right, I'm going to start a business. I just kind of fell into it. And I think that's also been my advantage and disadvantage, because I've had to learn things pretty quickly and I didn't really have a clear path. So maybe now I wish I did have a clear path, because I think a lot of things would be easier. Saying that, I didn't realise how much you can do in the world of baking, cake decorating, culinary arts, etc. I wouldn't know that I would have a YouTube channel. I wish I knew how many things there were to choose from. So many of you asked this question, how do I get my buttercream so white? I use Swiss meringue buttercream, so when you make a Swiss meringue, it is naturally white because it's just egg white and sugar. And then I use a really good quality butter. It's not necessarily expensive, it's just a good quality. And I think the higher quality butters don't have that yellow tinge to it, so when I add it to my buttercream, it stays white. It's not bright white, but it's white. And I don't add any colouring or anything. So how do I get it so white? I don't know. That's the colour it is. So photographing and editing photos of cakes. Again, I think this requires a whole tutorial, but I'll give you 3 tips. Number 1, natural lighting. As good as studio lights are, you'll create shadow and different temperatures. There's nothing better than natural light. Number 2, a clean, nice background. I used to stick to white backgrounds, but now I've changed to colour. But as long as they're clean and bright and make the cake stand out, then that's really important. And number 3, use a good camera. Nowadays we have amazing phones that can take amazing photos, but I still use a camera for my photos. Rosamenta Bakery. How, as a baker, can we contribute to climate change? So I think what she meant was, how can we contribute to preventing climate change? There's loads of waste in the kitchen. It's one of my biggest frustrations of how much we go through. Wasted food, wasted ingredients, things going past our sell-by dates, plastic wrap, etc. I think there's only so much we can do in the sense of recycling, for example. Luckily, I can recycle food, but I know where my mum lives, they don't do recycling food. That's out of her hands. So I think the best way of going around it is just trying to reduce your waste or reusing your waste. So I had people for tea the other day, and what I did with my offcuts of cake, I actually ended up cutting out little circles and filling the circles with some leftover ganache and making little tea cakes for them. Little did they know they were just offcuts. So Decadent Bakes has asked, do I assemble my tiered wedding cakes at the venue or before transporting? The largest cake that I've transported whole was a 4-tier cake ranging from 10 inches on the bottom to 4 inches on top. I just made sure it was really secure inside. I've also done it where I take them separately and stack them at the venue. The problem with that is that because the buttercream gets soft, it gets quite messy. So if you do that, just take spare buttercream with you. If you can, I actually stack them before transporting, and I've got a nice big fridge that I can keep them in, so they're pretty secure. Jessie bakes, what is my favourite thing about baking? I love that question. Do you know what I love? Is it makes people smile. Saying that out loud makes me realise how cheesy it sounds, but it's true. And that is why I absolutely love making cakes. So some people ask, why do you still make the cakes if you're doing YouTube and all this stuff? Because I love presenting customers with a cake, because they smile, and it's always for a happy celebration. And I think we live in a world which is just full of sad and terrible news, which you obviously can't ignore. But there's something also amazing about celebrating and being happy, and cake especially is such a big part of it. Why wouldn't you love it? I love making people smile. There you go. That's my favourite thing about baking. Sarah has asked what my biggest challenge I have faced as a freelancer, kind of baker, and creating my own business. The biggest challenge, I think, is motivation. So you are in charge of your own hours, and no one's telling you what to do, which to some people sound like a dream. You can wake up at 11 o'clock and do whatever you want. No, because unlike most people, you don't have a salary. So it's not like you can just rely on a salary coming in at the end of the month. You have to make the work happen. You just have to keep motivated, and you have to constantly think of the next thing to do. And if you are feeling a bit down, then do something to push you up. So it's a very not lonely in the sense I feel all alone, but again, there's no one around you telling you what direction to go in. I found it hard, but also rewarding, because I've got to where I am today because of that. It's definitely harder than what it sounds like to go freelance. Samantha Bakes, what are my favourite songs? I don't really have favourite songs, but I have a few favourite artists. I actually love Israeli music. I listen to that, and it's good to listen to because I don't understand it. I'm not paying attention to the words. My favourite band is Lifehouse, not Lighthouse Family, Lifehouse. I'm a little secret rock star. I also love musical music, so I've been listening to the Hamilton soundtrack. I also listen to there's a radio station of musical theatre. Yeah, I should probably stop talking now before you think I'm a complete and utter weirdo. So another question asking on how to start a baking business. There's quite a few questions, so I'll just kind of do a summary as the last question. Starting a baking business, it depends what you're going for, but I'll tell you how I did mine. I worked as a chef in a cafe, and I made a deal with my boss at the time that I can use the kitchen after hours, and I would log all my ingredients that I use, and they would come out my paycheck. That guaranteed me good quality ingredients, a professional kitchen to work from, and also a good clientele because I was meeting with customers. So that doesn't mean that you have to go out and get a job in a cafe and make the cakes from the cafe, but that is just how I did it. So I kind of already started on a professional level. If you want to start a home baking business, like I mentioned before, get your kitchen checked. You don't necessarily have to kind of register with some big whole food selling company to get your ingredients. I get mine from supermarkets. I just have a delivery of it, and that's consistent enough for me. If you're starting a business, like any business, think of a name, make yourself a logo. It doesn't have to be fancy, but that can go on your packaging because you're creating a brand at the end of the day. Things like a website, an Instagram, of course, they're really important because you want to be found, and you're found on the internet nowadays, most of the time. People laugh when I give them business cards, but I think they're really important to have. I actually once gave someone a business card and they said, "What are you doing? Give me your Instagram handle." And it really hit me that I realised that we're living in such a modern world. Don't forget, there are people who don't have Instagram, and it's good to just give them a business card. Be creative and be yourself. You don't want to start a business based on someone else. So that's also something that I've become really aware of. Rather than trying to do something that someone else is doing, I'm taking advantage of what makes me unique and different. And lastly, probably the most important thing is make sure your stuff tastes good. There's that phrase always, things look lovely but taste horrible. No. If you're doing a baking business, it has to taste good. That's probably the most important thing. So I have been talking a lot. But I hope you enjoyed this Q&A. Thank you again to every single one of you for subscribing to my channel. I literally couldn't be where I am today without you. I genuinely mean that. I'm going to be doing more focused tutorials such as starting a business and the best way to photograph your cakes as well. But any other suggestions for tutorials that you want to see, then write in the comments below. And in the meantime, if you are new to the channel, welcome. Please check out my other videos because there are actual tutorials on them. I hope you enjoyed this and I will see you next time.